Ever get this feeling like the old ways of looking at the world, they just don't quite fit anymore? Like we're trying to read a map that's totally outdated.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we're headed in this deep dive. We're going right to the core of what makes us human, especially now when everything seems to be changing so
All
fast.
right, right.
And we've got some seriously thought-provoking ideas to dig into from Ognyan Minchev.
Okay.
He's a Bulgarian political scientist and a philosopher, really interesting guy. And he's been wrestling with these questions of where humanity is going. Like, are we merging with technology? Are we seeing like a resurgence of spirituality? Or is it something we haven't even imagined yet?
I love it.
Yeah, so one of Minchev's ideas that really struck me is this concept of two completely different ways of understanding what it means to be human. And get this, these viewpoints, they actually shape everything. How we approach technology, religion, the meaning of life, you name it.
And it's fascinating how these viewpoints play out in how we see ourselves. One view, it sees humans as essentially material beings. So think of it like this. Our brains are incredibly complex computers, right?
Okay.
You feed them certain information, you get predictable outcomes. Emotions, our thoughts, even our sense of self, it all comes down to physical processes, really.
So, okay, so if we're just like, complex machines, does that mean we can upgrade? Like, is transhumanism the next logical step?
Exactly. And that's a question a lot of people are struggling with right now, right? If you can improve our physical abilities and cognitive abilities with technology, where do we draw that line between being human and being a machine?
It's a mind-blowing question. And then Minchev throws another log on the fire, right? With this whole idea of a spiritual core to humanity, something that goes beyond just the physical stuff, the wiring of our brains.
This is where it gets really interesting, because this challenges a lot of assumptions that have shaped, especially Western thought, since the Enlightenment.
Right.
That whole period was all about logic and reason and pushing back against traditional religious, dogma.
So are we talking about like going back to religion?
Not necessarily, no, not quite. It's more about recognizing that being human isn't just about rational thought or scientific progress. There's this yearning for something more, something that brings meaning and purpose to life. And that might look like a renewed interest in spirituality for some people, but it could also be expressed through art, through nature, through connection with other people. It could be finding purpose in your work, or even just like a deeper appreciation for the mystery of existence. Yeah.
And this isn't just some philosophical debate either. I mean, these two viewpoints, the material versus the spiritual, they actually show up in our everyday lives.
Right.
In the choices we make all the time.
Absolutely. It affects everything. How we deal with technology, how we raise our kids, how we vote, even how we deal with grief and loss. It shapes our whole understanding of the future.
And, speaking of choices, it makes me think about how these totally different ways of seeing the world, material versus spiritual, how they show up in politics. Because let's be real, things are kind of messy right now.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And Minchev, he points out that even those labels we love to use, liberal, conservative, they're starting to feel a little, I don't know.
Outdated.
Yeah, outdated. Exactly.
Like, tell me about it. It's like everyone's playing this political label roulette.
Right.
What was radical is normal now, and what was normal is suddenly radical. It's like, what is going on?
Yeah, exactly. And what we're seeing is like this really deep tension between like progress and tradition. It's like woven into the fabric of, human societies.
Yeah.
How much change is too much change, right? When does holding on to the past actually hold us back,
And you know what? This isn't just some political theory. This is like real life stuff we all deal with. Like, think about it. That job offer that would mean like moving your whole family, is that exciting or is that terrifying? Or that new tech that everyone's talking about that's changing everything. Do you embrace it or do you resist it? We're always like weighing the comfortable and familiar against the unknown.
I love that. That's such a good point.
Yeah.
And, all these personal struggles, they're happening on a global scale too, right? It's like Minchev says, we're in this era of transition where the old maps, they don't get us where we thought we were going anymore.
So, okay, what does that even mean? Like, what are the signs that we're in this era of transition?
Well, one example that Minchev talks about that I think is really interesting is this idea that economic growth, which we've been told forever is the key to happiness, it doesn't really line up with how people actually feel. Like, think about it. We're told to work harder, make more money, buy more stuff. But does any of that actually make us feel fulfilled?
That's so true. You can have all the stuff in the world and still feel kind of empty. So what's the missing piece then?
Right. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But, there's actually a lot of research that says things like social connection, having a sense of purpose, and, even spirituality, those are huge for happiness. Those are the things that give life meaning, that make us feel connected to something bigger than ourselves.
So it's like we're so busy building the things of a good life that we forget about all that other stuff, the relationships, the communities, just belonging, the stuff that actually makes life, worth living.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this kind of ties into another big shift that Minchev talks about, the decline of traditional institutions.
Okay.
Think about the role that, say, religion used to play. For better or worse, it gave people a sense of community, some moral guidance, or even just the family unit. I mean, it's not like those things are gone, obviously, but they're different now. They're evolving. And that leaves kind of a vacuum.
And into that vacuum rushes, everything, right?
Yeah.
All these new ideologies, new ways of connecting, but also a lot of anxiety and just uncertainty about what's next.
Exactly. And that brings us to another big part of this transition we're talking about, something we can't really ignore.
War. It's like the elephant in the room, right? And Minchev, he doesn't shy away from it. He talks about the war in Ukraine, how it's this really stark reminder that, the old rules, they don't apply anymore. The rules of global order, they're being rewritten right in front of us.
Yeah, and it can be easy to look back and be like, how did we not see this coming?
Right.
But it's human, right? We cling to what we think we know, even when it's not working anymore. Like, we had this whole idea that in the 21st century, things would be different.
Yeah, like people were logical.
Exactly. Rational actors would always choose to talk it out instead of,
Instead of fighting.
Right, exactly. Economic ties would guarantee peace.
And then, boom, reality hits.
Exactly. It's like, whoa, okay, maybe we didn't have it all figured out. And that's what makes Minchev's work so important, Yeah. He's pushing us to look beyond just the headlines, beyond what we think is true, and really wrestle with how complicated this moment in history really is.
So where does that leave us then? I mean, if we're in this huge transition, everything feels uncertain, the old ways aren't working, what do we hold on to? How do we even navigate this?
Right. The million-dollar question. Right. And, Minchev, he doesn't exactly give us a roadmap.
Yeah.
But he would say, I think, that the first step is being willing to question everything. Question our own biases.
Yes.
Be open to ideas that make us a little uncomfortable.
Get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yes. Exactly. Because it's in those moments when what we thought we knew is challenged, that's where real growth happens. That's where we really start to understand.
So it's not about going back to some perfect past, right? Or even trying to force some perfectly imagined future.
Exactly. It's about being right here, right now, in all the messiness and complexity. And maybe, just maybe, that's okay. Maybe that's where the good stuff is.
Maybe the messiness is where it's at.
Yeah.
That's a good place to leave it. So we've been talking about how the old labels, liberal, conservative, even material versus spiritual, they don't really cover it anymore, do they?
You don't cut it? No.
So if those labels don't work, what new ways of seeing ourselves, of understanding each other might come out of this crazy, messy time? Something to think about, right?
A lot to think about.
And maybe your own deep dive to go on. Thanks for joining us.